Here's the first truth. Wrath begins with rejection. It's where it all starts. Wrath begins with rejection. Now, what's interesting about this is that all of us probably have some story in life that we experience rejection, at least to some degree. Now, maybe we can kind of go back to our childhood and we remember the moments that we were bullied by somebody because of how we looked or not really fitting in, and we experienced rejection at a young age. Maybe it was because of the words of a teacher or a counselor or a principal or somebody who looked at us and said that you're not good enough, you're not measuring up. You're never going to make it. And we experience the sting as it were related to those words. Or maybe for some of us, we experienced rejection in our homes growing up. We grew up in a home with an alcoholic parent, and we experienced the rejection and betrayal that gets associated with that parent's absence. Or maybe we grew up in an inconsistent household that we didn't know if our parent was going to slug us or hug us at any moment that we experienced, right? We experience rejection in all forms and fashions. For some of us, it was much later in life. We experience rejection at the hands of an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend or an ex-spouse in some way. The person who was supposed to love us the most wounded us deepest. My guess is we all have a version of that story. We all have a moment in our life that we experience rejection to some degree. Because we recognize the second principle about wrath. Wrath, it begins with rejection, but wrath wants to retaliate. I mean, wrath is like licking its chops. It wants to retaliate. It wants to kind of get somebody back for the wound that they have caused us. If you kind of take it back to, the story, here's what it says. God intervenes and he talks to Cain. He says, Cain, why are you so angry? The Lord asked Cain. Why do you look so dejected? You will be accepted if you do what is right. But if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you, but you must subdue it and be its master. You see what's going on like in Cain's life, that those emotions that he's feeling because of the rejection, they're just welling up inside of him. God intervenes. God's trying to talk Cain off the ledge because he's stewing, he's brewing. It's about to be spewing, right? That's where Cain is at. It kind of reminds me, I read an article about a business that was started in the late 80s that was called Revenge a la carte. That if you were angry with somebody and you wanted to get back at somebody, you could actually hire this company to get back at them on your behalf. So for example, you could pay them $180. They would deliver a coffin to the person with a note attached to it that says, I wish you were here. Or if you don't want to spend $180, you could just send them a bouquet of dead flowers. Or you can spend $20 to get their name and number added to every great telemarketing list out there, right? Now, I don't know if this company is still in business or not, but you kind of get the sense from Cain, he's ready to dial a little revenge a la carte. God tries to intervene, and he says these words, you must subdue it or it will control you. In other words, he's saying you got to control it or it will control you. Cain, you got to get a hold on this because wrath wants to take revenge. But don't take revenge. You've got to learn to release instead of revenge. You see, forgiveness truly is based not just on what we're capable of doing. I'm actually convinced that forgiveness is not possible on our own. Because forgiveness is actually based on who he is and what he has done. You know the whole phrase around forgiveness that sometimes people will tell you you're supposed to forgive and? Help me out again. Forgive and? I don't even think that's possible. Do you? I mean, it sounds so good. They both start with F. It's a nice alliteration, but I don't really think it's possible. I don't know if it's possible to forgive and forget. I don't think it's possible to not remember those types of things. But I think I might argue that the better posturing is not forgive and forget, but the better posturing is actually this, to forgive and remember. Not remember what the person's done, but it's actually this, to remember who he is and remember what he has done. One of my favorite verses in Scripture, Romans chapter 8, maybe it's somewhat familiar to you, verse 28, it says this about God. It says, in all things, God works for the good of those that love him. In all things. In all things, God is up to good. That doesn't mean that God orchestrated that horrible thing that you experienced. That doesn't mean that God desired for you to experience rejection, but it does mean that in all things, including that thing, God is able to work good. That's an amazing thing about who God is. I remember years ago, I was listening to a Christian radio station, and somebody called in, and they shared with the radio host this horrific thing that they'd experienced in life. And then the woman asked, she says, what kind of God would allow that to happen? It's a very honest question. I'll never forget the response of the radio host. He said, I don't know if you're able to hear this or if you're ready to hear this, but it's the kind of God who can bring good out of evil. It's a kind of God who can bring beauty out of pain. It's the kind of God who can bring life even from death. That's who he is. Because the truth is, my life and in your life, because of our sin, we have in fact rejected God. He was the one experienced rejection because of our decision, because of our sin. But here's the truth. Though God was rejected because of our sin, God could have retaliated. God could have poured his wrath out on your life and on my life. But God chose to withhold his wrath from us. Instead of sending his son Jesus into this world, Jesus endured that on our behalf so that you and I could be set free. The reality is, the very moment that God should have punished my life, God extended forgiveness to my life. So whenever I'm in a situation where I feel like somebody's wounded me, that somebody has rejected me, what I'm compelled to do is to not forgive and forget, but to forgive and remember. To remember a God who released me from my sin, who gave me undeserved love, undeserved mercy, that I can rest in his forgiveness. It's impossible to be a forgiving person until you fully embrace that you are a forgiven person. But forgiveness can release that bitter root. Forgiveness can set us free to live something different. We don't have to live lives where anger is always boiling under the surface. Because of Jesus, you and I can be set free.